They dismissed her with quiet cruelty, cold stares, tight-lipped smiles, and a resignation letter already typed. They thought she'd crumble, disappear, or worse, conform. But they hadn't read the manuscript, titled Lethal Seduction, or realized it was based on a true story, hers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence in the boardroom was louder than any insult. A dozen executives in pressed suits stared down at her, some through glassy disinterest, others with concealed scorn. The logo of Hollandspire Publishing glowed faintly behind them, an ironic beacon for a place that promised to amplify bold new voices. Apparently, some voices came with fine print. Valencia Roan stood at the head of the long oak table, fingers curled tightly around the edge. Her manuscript, her life's work, sat printed and bound in a thin black folder beside her. It was titled in crimson script, Lethal Seduction. "You've written something unconventional," said Everett Quayle, VP of Acquisitions. His voice was even, but his words sliced like paper cuts. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us." "Now back to the story. I wrote the truth," Valencia replied. "Calm, controlled. That's what we're paid to publish, isn't it?" "Truth," murmured Elaine Rieger, the brand strategist. "Or a manifesto wrapped in erotic rebellion." Valencia didn't flinch. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times in her head. The glances they exchanged. The moral outrage pretending to be market concern. The soft disapproval masking something harder, colder. "We can't move forward with this," Everett said finally, gesturing toward the manuscript without touching it. "We're not a platform for personal politics." "But this," she began, tapping the cover, "is the story of a woman who was made invisible and dangerous at the same time. Who they called a deviant for simply wanting to be loved. Who used her mind, her body, and her silence to outthink a machine built to erase her." "That may be," he replied, "but Hollandspire is a family brand. We don't want backlash." She laughed once, low and bitter. "You mean you don't want to be seen defending a bisexual female protagonist who doesn't ask for your permission?" Silence again. When she left the building that day, it was raining. The kind of rain that drenched your bones, not just your skin. She didn't have an umbrella. She didn't want one. Let them see her soaked. Let them think she was defeated. Because she wasn't. Not even close. Back in her apartment, a cramped but sun-drenched unit, 4 floors above a bakery, Valencia sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, surrounded by notes, flash drives, and rejection letters. Her laptop glowed from the center of the storm, like a lighthouse. She opened a blank document, a new one. At the top, she typed, "To the ones who thought I'd stay quiet." Then she scrolled to the end of Lethal Seduction, her original manuscript, and began to rewrite. Not edit, rewrite. Because what they didn't know was that the first version was only the mask. The real story, the raw, blood-inked, unrepentant version, was still locked in her. And it had teeth. Flashback. Valencia, age 17, sitting on her bed with a bruised lip and a burning secret. Her mother's voice echoing down the hall, "God doesn't make girls like that." The first girl she ever loved, Tasha, had kissed her in the library behind the linguistics section. Gentle, afraid. Valencia had felt fireworks. Her parents had seen betrayal. She never kissed Tasha again. Present. Valencia's phone buzzed. An unknown number. A short voicemail. She pressed play. "Miss Roan. My name is Micah Halberd. I read your manuscript before they pulled it. Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m. Green Room Cafe. Don't bring anyone. Lethal Seduction isn't just fiction, is it?" Click. The voicemail ended. Her breath caught. Someone had seen it. Really seen it. Not just the plot, but the message. The warnings, the veiled references to something darker that pulsed beneath the story's surface. Could he be the first person who understood? She looked at the cover page again. Lethal Seduction, the story of a woman who fought back, not with violence, but with elegance, memory, and a network of secrets. A woman whose sensuality was used to judge her, whose silence was used to control her, but who turned both into weapons. Maybe it wasn't fiction after all. Not completely. She closed her laptop slowly. Tomorrow would change everything, not just her career, but the reason she'd written the book in the first place. Because Lethal Seduction wasn't just a story to publish, it was a message to people who thought she'd stay hidden. The Green Room Cafe was too perfect. Artisanal lighting, mint-colored tiles, windows that framed the city like a painting. The kind of place where nothing dangerous should happen. Which is why Valencia's nerves lit up like fuse wire when she saw the man waiting for her at the back corner table, alone, untouched coffee in front of him, eyes scanning her like a file he'd already memorized. "Micah Halberd?" she asked. He stood to greet her. Early 40s, silver-streaked hair, suit without a tie. The kind of man you couldn't place. Military, lawyer, intelligence. "You're taller than I imagined," he said with a smile. "And braver." "Who are you?" she asked, staying standing. "Someone who saw what Hollenspire tried to bury." He slid a copy of her manuscript across the table, the real one. Her original, not the version she watered down, the one she never officially submitted. "I never sent this out," she said quietly. "I know, that's why it's important." She sat, slowly. Her heart was thudding. Either this was a setup, or something had just cracked open. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Why now?" Micah leaned in. "Because Lethal Seduction isn't just a manuscript, it's a coded confession, a testimony, and a warning." Her breath caught. "You know what I'm talking about," he continued. "The woman in the story, Rianne, she's not fictional, or at least, not entirely." She stayed silent. "I don't need names," he said, "but I do need to know, is everything in here based on real events? The system of manipulation, the agency, the disappearances of whistleblowers, the seduction protocol." She stared at him. Slowly, she nodded. Micah sat back. "Then you're already in danger." Flashback. 6 months earlier. Valencia sat in the basement of a safe house. A black folder lay open before her. Inside were notes, witness statements, torn documents. She had been helping someone. A woman named Eva Marcel, an ex-government translator, who had stumbled across an underground behavior modification program. A program that used women, especially queer women, as tools in tests. If they resisted, they were erased. If they complied, they became invisible soldiers in a psychological war the public never saw. Eva disappeared 3 weeks after meeting Valencia. No trace, no noise, just gone. Valencia kept everything, every file, every recording. She hadn't known what to do with it, until she wrote Lethal Seduction. Back at the cafe, Valencia whispered, "You're not from a publisher, are you?" "No." Micah slid a card across the table. "No name. Just a symbol, a serpent eating its tail. I work with people who make things public. When institutions bury truths, we exhume them. When a message is dangerous enough to silence," he tapped the manuscript, "we amplify it. And why help me? Because the story's not just yours anymore. It's part of something larger, and they already know you published the first draft. They're watching." Valencia felt the air in her lungs get heavier. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," Micah smiled grimly. "Now we finish the story. The way it was always meant to end. Not as a warning, but as a reckoning." Micah stood. "Meet me tomorrow. Same time. Bring everything, every draft, every source. It's time we made your truth louder than their lies." As he left, Valencia stared at her manuscript. A fictional tale they had tried to bury. But in truth, Lethal Seduction was about to become the loudest scream no one saw coming. Before there was Rianne in the manuscript, there was Cassandra. Her real name wasn't used. Not in public, not in records. She was just a whisper, a myth told behind closed doors by insiders, who knew something was wrong, but had no proof. But Valencia had proof, and the pages of Lethal Seduction were soaked in Cassandra's shadow. The next morning, Valencia arrived at the cafe carrying a locked satchel. Inside, flash drives, journals, and a small red notebook Eva had handed her before disappearing. Micah was already seated. He didn't say hello, just nodded toward the bag. "Tell me about the woman in the red ledger," he said. Valencia sat down and slowly opened the notebook. Inside were names, dates, payments, and phrases in shorthand. She was an informant, Valencia said. Or maybe something more. Her name never came up directly, but everyone Eva interviewed, everyone who spoke in fear, they mentioned her in fragments. Describe her, Micah said. Valencia flipped through the worn pages. She was a recruitment target who flipped. They say she was trained in psychological influence and subversion. She was supposed to be an asset, but she vanished after breaking protocol. No one knows what happened to her. She didn't vanish, Micah said. She went underground, changed names, and started leaking documents under a code name, Red Rayen. Valencia froze. Rayen, from my story. She inspired your character. You just didn't know it. The fiction she'd written wasn't fiction at all. Flashback, 2 years ago. Eva sits in Valencia's kitchen, chain smoking, hands trembling. They wanted me to help translate, just harmless memos at first. But then, files came in encrypted, and they weren't from foreign embassies. They were internal, human subjects, orientation profiling, submissive predator classifications. Valencia had taken notes, had asked Eva for everything. They were tracking women with non-traditional sexual identities. Eva had whispered, labeling them based on malleability, seduction resistance. It was clinical, but you could feel the obsession behind it. And Cassandra's name, it had come up again and again, always scribbled in red ink, back to present. Micah leaned forward. We believe Red Rayen is still alive. She's trying to expose the same people who silenced Eva. Valencia's voice cracked slightly. You think I can help find her? I think you already have. He tapped the manuscript again. In writing Lethal Seduction, you may have said enough to smoke her out, or draw them in. That night, Valencia couldn't sleep. Her apartment felt too quiet. The shadows in the hallway longer than they should have been. She sat at her writing desk, flipping through her manuscript line by line, and then she saw it. A note she hadn't remembered writing, hidden in a scene between Rayen and her handler. A line that didn't fit the original plot. The hourglass bleeds backward at 3:14. She didn't write that, not consciously. And suddenly she remembered the strange glitch her document had done weeks ago. A flicker, a crash, then an auto-recovered version. She hadn't checked every line. Had someone tampered with it, or had someone used it? Micah had said her manuscript wasn't just dangerous, it was bait. She highlighted the phrase, searched it online, nothing. Then she searched her notes. Eva's transcripts, one hit. Hourglass protocol, fail-safe meeting for compromised informants. Location Pier 314. Valencia sat back. She hadn't just written a novel. She'd accidentally or intentionally written a map. And now someone was following it. The map led nowhere. Pier 314 didn't exist on the official registry. Valencia checked 3 different databases: municipal zoning, Coast Guard, maritime archives. Nothing past Pier 312. No mention, no records, no construction permits. But Eva had written it, and now it appeared inside Lethal Seduction. Someone had added it, buried it in a fictional conversation between Rayen and her handler. Valencia opened the original draft, searched the word hourglass, found it again in a different chapter. If it all goes dark, go backward. The hourglass bleeds at 3:14. Bleeds, not just backward, bleeds. She sat on her bed, manuscript pages scattered around her like a ritual. Micah had said the story was no longer hers. Maybe it never was. The next morning, Valencia went to the waterfront. She counted piers, all the way to 312. After that, the numbered signs stopped. But something else caught her eye. A rusted gate with no label. Behind it, an overgrown boardwalk. No lights, no signage, just a faded stencil near the lock. P3.14, her breath caught. It wasn't a pier, it was a code. Not 314, but P3.14. She slipped through a broken gap in the fencing. The boards creaked beneath her step. No one around, just sea fog and seagulls, and the cold, sharp scent of salt and rot. At the far end of the path stood a small structure, like a fisherman's shack. Door cracked open, a red symbol painted on the door, a circle broken at the top, an hourglass bleeding. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the door open. Inside, dust, silence, a single chair, and on it, a flash drive. No note, no name, just a flash drive, and a matchbook. From the Green Room Cafe, she left fast, heart pounding. Back at home, she slid the drive into her offline laptop. One file, video. She clicked play. Grainy footage. A woman partially shadowed, eyes sharp, hair cut military short, wearing a black scarf tied like a signal. She spoke directly to the camera. If you're watching this, you already broke protocol. Good. That means you're still thinking for yourself. Valencia leaned forward, barely breathing. You've been marked, but they'll call it mentorship, promotion, feedback. The woman smirked. They always do. This is not just a program, it's a filter. They identify women with non-standard profiles, queer, curious, resistant. Then they test thresholds, break confidence, reshape desire. If you're still with me, find the ledger. The video cut. Valencia sat in silence. She finally had a face, and a new target. The ledger. She opened her drawer, pulled out Eva's red notebook. Its final page was blank, except for a scrawled phrase, Red Ledger. Last kept by H.R. Quinn. She didn't know who Quinn was, but she was done waiting. Time to stop writing about danger, and walk straight into it. The name H.R. Quinn wasn't in any public employee directory. Not at Hollandspire. Not in city records. Not in LinkedIn. Nothing. But Valencia had a trick, one of her many. She logged into her old freelance admin portal, an outdated backdoor database she once used to cross-reference ghost contributors. Typed in Quinn, HR one hit. Helena Quinn, former senior editor, terminated 6 years ago, cause internal breach of confidentiality. No photo, just a flag, do not rehire, and a note, archived. Not visible, unless you knew how to decrypt legacy comments. She opened the log. Quinn documented unauthorized behavioral surveys within the diversity training framework, escalated to compliance board, sealed under Section 9B, transferred to inactive disk. File closed by Everett Queel. Everett, the same Everett who dismissed Lethal Seduction, who called her story a personal manifesto. He'd buried Quinn too. Valencia picked up her phone, called Micah. No answer. Straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She couldn't trust that line. Not anymore. Instead, she went to the office. Not Hollandspire. She was blacklisted now. But the print shop across the street. A place she used to run proofs. The manager owed her a favor. Hey, she asked quietly. Still got access to Hollandspire's employee badges. He blinked. Depends. Whose? She smiled thinly. The woman they tried to erase. 2 hours later, she stood in the lobby wearing a visitor badge registered under Quinn. Helena, internal review. The receptionist barely glanced at her. Security buzzed her through. Everything smelled the same, like toner, espresso and ambition. She took the stairs. 5th floor, executive archives. Most of it was digital now, secure. But the old HR binders were still in the back, behind a locked cabinet labeled Employee Terminations, 2014, 29. She used a skeleton key, pulled out Quinn's folder. It was thin, too thin, redacted in places that made no sense, but one sticky note remained. Red ledger scanned, burn original, USB and blue file box. Q. She looked around. No blue file box. Then movement, footsteps, approaching. She shoved the folder into her coat, slid the cabinet shut, and ducked into the supply closet, just before a janitor turned the corner. Back home, she scanned the sticky note, held it under UV light. A phone number appeared, followed by coordinates. She mapped them. Abandoned greenhouse, outskirts of town. The address wasn't just familiar, it was the location from Chapter 17 of Lethal Seduction. The exact scene where Rennie meets the woman with the scar behind her ear. She didn't write that detail, not consciously. That night, she packed her satchel, laptop, flashlight, pepper spray, the red notebook. Micah still hadn't called back, but she didn't care.
Someone wanted her to follow this trail. Someone wanted Lethal Seduction to speak louder, and she was done playing safe. As she left her apartment, the street was too quiet. A black car idled at the far corner. She didn't look twice, didn't run, didn't hide. She had already published a weapon. Now it was time to find out who taught her how to use it.
The greenhouse looked like it had been swallowed by nature. Vines strangled its steel frame. Moss crept across shattered glass. The sign out front had rusted beyond recognition. Valencia stood outside the gate, breathing slow, listening. No voices, no movement. She pushed through. The door groaned as it opened. The inside smelled like old soil and stale rain. Somewhere, a bird screeched. Then silence again. She moved past wilted ferns and broken planters, until she found the blue file box, exactly where Chapter 17 said it would be. It sat on a rotting bench beneath a skylight, covered in dirt, but untouched. She opened it. Inside, a flash drive, an envelope marked Q, a laminated badge for Inspire Well Leadership Program, Helena Quinn, and a photo. The photo stopped her breath. It was a younger Ava, standing beside a woman with short dark hair. The woman from the video. The one called Red Rainy. They weren't afraid in the picture. They were smiling, like they'd just survived something, or escaped it. Valencia pocketed everything, turned to leave. Then she heard the sound. Footsteps, fast, closing in. She ran behind a pillar of crates, held her breath, peered through a crack. Two men entered, one in a black windbreaker, the other with a walkie clipped to his belt. They looked like contractors, but their eyes moved like hunters. "Check the West Wing," one muttered. "She's probably still here." Valencia didn't wait. She slipped through a side door, took the long way back, through a fence, over a ditch, covered in mud, heart pounding. Back home. She locked the door, closed every curtain, shut off every light, then turned on the offline laptop. She inserted the flash drive. It loaded slowly. One folder, titled Rainy, unedited. Inside, transcripts, maps, psychological profiles, interview logs and something else. A folder labeled AJSONs. She clicked it, and froze. There were dozens of names, each with a video, each one labeled potential candidate. Orientation profile, non-compliant. She clicked the first. A young woman, sitting in a sterile room, being asked about her sexuality, her childhood, her fantasies. The questions became invasive, then cruel, then weaponized. She clicked another, and another. Some of these women were artists, activists, writers, all of them queer, all of them misfits, all of them chosen. Valencia backed away from the screen. Her own face could have been one of theirs. Maybe it already had been. She opened the envelope marked Q. Inside was a handwritten note. "If this reaches you, the program thinks you're useful, or dangerous. Either way, you don't have much time. Find Rainy. She knows how to end it. Quinn." Below that, a GPS coordinate. Latitude, longitude, no address. Just a location. Deep in the rural zone. North of any town. Near nothing. Valencia shut the laptop. She had proof now. Names, videos, files. But no plan. No backup. And no Micah. She picked up the GPS note, stared at it. If Rain was real, if she was alive, she was the last missing piece. And maybe, the first person who ever truly saw her. The GPS led her off the paved road, past a collapsed fence, through a field of dry reeds whispering like paper, into a grove where cell signal died without warning. The coordinates ended at a clearing. No house, no mailbox, no path. But the ground told a different story. Boot prints, fresh tire tracks, a square of grass that bent the wrong direction. She pressed her heel into the soil. A resonance like a drum. She knelt and brushed away leaves. A metal hatch appeared, painted the color of dirt, bolted with a dial lock. There was no keypad, just an engraving. A broken circle. An hourglass bleeding. She remembered the line from the manuscript. The hourglass bleeds at 3:14. She rotated the dial. 3, 1, 4. The bolt released with a sigh. Cold air rose from below. Metal stairs descended into quiet. She took one step, then another. Her breath fogged in the dim. Her hand shook, but not from fear, from recognition. The safe house smelled like old paper and coriander, the kind of scent that clings to ink and skin. A single bulb flickered alive as she reached the bottom. Motion sensor. Delayed by design. The room was small. Concrete walls. A table bolted to the floor. A kettle, 3 mugs, a shortwave radio, and a corkboard covered in strings and maps. On the table sat a phone. Burner model. No numbers on the screen. Just one word. Listen. She tapped the speaker. Static hissed. Then a woman's voice filled the room. Low, steady, measured like a metronome set to warning. If you made it this far, you're worse than stubborn. You're curious. You're dangerous to them. Valencia closed her eyes. The voice belonged to the woman in the video. To Red Rainey. Rule 1. The voice continued. Never arrive alone, which means you didn't follow Rule 1. Valencia looked up at the ceiling. A pinhole camera stared back like a pupil. She stared right into it. She refused to blink. I wrote inside your book because you're a better courier than a spy. You could carry dynamite in a love letter, and make them weep while it detonates. Your manuscript is the only place they forget to look. Valencia whispered. You edited my draft. The radio answered like it heard her. Not edited. Braided. I braided your story with mine. The bulb flickered again. A second light winked on over a steel door. No handle. Just a small slot at eye level. Rule 2. The voice said. Objects lie. Patterns don't. Find the red ledger by mapping the pattern, not the place. Valencia scanned the corkboard. Pins marked locations across the city. Green pins for auditions. Yellow pins for handlers. Red pins for vanished. There were too many red pins. Too close to her apartment. One sat exactly over Holland Spire. Another over the Green Room Cafe. A third over the old greenhouse. Someone had been following her route before she walked it. The radio crackled. Rule 3. Trust no rescuer who arrives early. Footsteps sounded above the hatch. Soft on dirt. Certain. In pairs. Valencia killed the light with her elbow. Dark folded around her like a cloak. She reached for the kettle. Found the weight of it steady in her hand. Hot water still warm. Someone had been here recently. The hatch opened with a whisper. A beam of daylight sliced the room. A silhouette framed the rectangle. Broad shoulders. No tie. Familiar. Valencia. Micah called softly.
Ah, it's me.
She didn't move. Her pulse leapt sideways. He climbed down the steps slowly. Hands open, palms forward. Like a man entering a chapel. I lost contact, he said. Your line went dead. I tracked your car by the rental tag. I'm here to help. The radio hissed. Raden's voice returned. Faint but razor-edged. Early. He's early. Rule 3. Micah looked at the radio. Then at the camera. Then at Valencia. You found her, he said. Good. We need to move. They're closing in. Where? Valencia asked. Her voice was calm. Cold water over a fever. Micah did not answer. He scanned the corkboard instead. Eyes flicking over pins. Calculating. Selecting. He reached for a map. Valencia took a half step in front of him. She raised the kettle an inch. Not much. Enough to say, stop. Micah froze. Surprise flickered across his face. Then something else. Something she didn't want to name. The radio rasped like a match head. Ask him who funds his amplifiers. Raiden said. Ask him who signs the invoices. Ask him why his organization never bleeds. Micah's jaw worked. He exhaled. A lot of people want the truth, he said carefully. Some of them are enemies of your enemies. Sometimes that has to be enough. That's not an answer, Valencia said. That's a budget line. He took another step. She didn't back away. The kettle felt heavy. The room felt small. Her choices felt exact. A soft tone chimed from the steel door. The slot slid open. A folded card slid out onto the floor, like a tongue from a sealed mouth. Micah glanced at it. Valencia picked it up first. On one side a symbol, the bleeding hourglass. On the other a sentence in clean block letters. Truth or catharsis. Choose one. Turn the card. She turned it. Two switches glinted in a recessed panel beside the door. One engraved truth. One engraved catharsis. A keyhole between them. No key. Don't, Micah warned. It could be a trap. The radio's voice was almost a whisper now. Tyrants survive on feelings without facts. Movements survive on facts without feelings. Choose wrong, and you burn either the evidence or the people. Valencia stood still long enough to feel her heartbeat slow. She thought about Ava. About Helena Quinn. About the women in the audition files. About herself at 17 with a bruised lip, and a secret she was told to be ashamed of. She set the kettle down. She reached into her satchel. She pulled out the red notebook. Its spine had cracked long ago. Its last page had always looked blank. Under angled light, ink rose like a bruise. A tiny symbol appeared at the bottom edge. Not an hourglass. A key. She pressed the notebook's lower corner against the panel. A hidden catch sprang. A thin key slid out from inside the notebook's board. Ava had hidden it there. Quinn had sealed it. Raiden had led her to it. Micah stared at the key. At Valencia. At the door. He looked like a man witnessing a myth become practical. Valencia fit the key into the slot. She did not touch truth. She did not touch catharsis. She turned the key halfway. The panel lit both words at once. A third light appeared between them. Unlabeled. Waiting. The steel door unlocked on a breath. Opened inward. Warm light spilled across concrete. Footsteps sounded from within. Not hurried. Not afraid. Certain. A woman stepped into the doorway. Scar behind her ear like a hyphen between names. Eyes like storm glass catching sun. She studied Micah first, then the radio, then Valencia. I wrote the first line of your book, she said. And you wrote the last line of mine. Valencia did not breathe. Raiden smiled without showing teeth. Welcome to the part of the story that doesn't fit on paper, she said. Close the hatch. We're out of time. Valencia closed the hatch. The locks slid home like decisions. Above them engines grew louder. Below the truth finally had a face. And the choice she thought she'd made split into two. She never knew existed. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Valencia sat in the back row of the tiny underground chamber that used to be a library, now repurposed as a hearing room for internal appeals. Above her, a single bulb flickered, casting long shadows across the stone walls. The council's chosen representatives sat behind a long table, looking down with the kind of expressions that practiced silence. Raiden sat beside her, fingers trembling just slightly against her notebook. No microphones, no recordings. Only written transcripts approved by the council after review. This was their way of letting someone scream, without anyone hearing the echo. Across the room a woman stepped forward. Late 60s. Sharp cheekbones. Eyes like a hawk's. Her name was Elira Temple. Former council archivist. Officially retired. Unofficially erased. She placed her trembling hands on the lectern, and cleared her throat. I know what you've read about me, she said. I know what you've not read. There was a low rustle from the gallery. A few gasps. A few scoffs. I worked for the council for 36 years, she continued. I catalogued every punishment, every purge, every person deemed misaligned or unfist. She locked eyes with the head examiner.
And I lied about every one of them. Valencia inhaled sharply. She wasn't the only one. Elira's voice grew steadier. Because I was told they were criminals. That they were deviant. That what they were was inconvenient. Inconvenient to a system that thrived on shadows. Gasps rippled again. One counselor scribbled furiously. Another whispered to the person next to him. But Elira didn't waver. They asked me to destroy documents. Alter dates. Replace files with fiction. And for years I did. Until the day I found her name. Valencia felt her chest tighten. She knew exactly who Elira meant. Ava Erlicent, the archivist said. A junior literature fellow. A lesbian. A whistleblower. And the writer of a document so dangerous, they treated it like a bomb. Lethal seduction. There it was.
Said.
Aloud for the first time in this chamber. The council flinched as if burned. But Elira pressed on. Ava didn't just expose corruption. She detailed a lineage of abuse. Exploitation of queer women in lower-tier housing. Psychological manipulation programs under the guise of reform. And a selective sterilization campaign, hidden inside health initiatives. Radiant's hand reached over and gripped Valencia's tightly. Elira held up a thin folder. This is a copy of the original intake log. With Ava's real signature. Not the forged one they used in the public records. A guard moved forward. The head examiner raised a hand. Let her finish, he muttered. Elira placed the folder on the table. And this. She pulled a second envelope from her coat. Is Ava's death certificate. Unsigned. Unverified. Because she never officially died. Valencia blinked. Wait. What? She disappeared. Elira said. Just days after submitting her manuscript. And the fire was never investigated properly. Because the lead investigator was my supervisor. And his wife? Elira looked directly at the woman on the far left of the council table. Is you Marlene? The silence was deafening. Someone stood up in the back. A flashbulb from a hidden camera went off. Marlene rose red-faced and began shouting. This is a fabrication. She's a disgruntled former employee. She's manipulating. But the head examiner held up his hand again. Elira didn't even blink. I have nothing left to lose, she said. And you have everything to hide. I was part of the machine. But now, I will be its undoing. She stepped away from the lectern. The room burst into chaos. 3 guards tried to escort her out. But someone in the crowd shouted, "Let her speak." Another shouted, "Where's the manuscript?" A chant broke out. "Let her speak. Let her speak." Radiant pulled Valencia aside. "We need to move." Valencia nodded, heart pounding. But then she caught Elira's eye again. The woman mouthed something before being dragged toward the door. "Check the grave." Valencia froze. The grave. Ava's grave. Supposedly sealed after the fire. Valencia turned to Rain. "We're going to need a shovel." They slipped out the side entrance as chaos rippled through the chamber. Outside, the sun was setting over the old city. The sky was gold and bleeding at the edges. Valencia exhaled slowly. The war was no longer in whispers. It had taken the stage. And for the first time in years, someone else had screamed first. They arrived at the cemetery just after 3 a.m. No streetlights. Only the soft glow of Raid's flashlight. And the crunch of frost beneath their boots. The air was colder than it should have been for that time of year. Or maybe it was just the weight of what they were about to do. Ava Licent's grave sat beneath a crumbling weeping willow. Plot B-17. A worn plaque marked her name and a date. Nothing more. No epitaph. No flowers. No visitors in years. According to the groundskeeper who took Valencia's quiet bribe. "I can't help you dig," he had muttered. "But I can make sure no one sees." Now Radine knelt in front of the grave, pulling her hoodie tight, as she unslung the foldable spade from her bag. "This is madness," she said. Valencia nodded. "It is. But we're doing it anyway." The first shovel of dirt made an awful sound, like it didn't want to be disturbed. They dug in silence. 1 foot, then 2, then 5. Sweat mixed with soil on their faces. Radine paused halfway through and said, "Why would they bury her in the public section?" Valencia's jaw clenched. They wanted her forgotten. But then metal. The spade struck something hard. A corner. Then a lid. A rusted coffin. Older than it should have been. Valencia dropped to her knees, running her fingers along the seam. There was no lock. No seal. Just rotten defiance. She opened it. And froze. Radine gasped. It was empty. No body. No bones. Just a thick weather-worn envelope sealed with wax. On the front, "For the one who sees." Valencia's fingers trembled as she pulled it free. Inside, a manuscript. Not a copy. Not what said. The original. Lethal Seduction. Pages still intact. Written in tight cursive. Ink smudged in places by what might have been tears. Or blood. On the first page, a hand-scrawled note. "If you are reading this, I am either very dead or very hunted. Use it. Burn the lies." A.L. Radine backed away slowly, hand over her mouth. "They buried the truth." "No," Valencia said. "They planted it." Radine's flashlight flickered. A noise behind them. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps. Valencia turned sharply. 3 figures stepped from behind a row of marble tombs. Black coats. Ikises. The council's private agents. "You shouldn't be here," the tallest one said. "We were told this grave was sealed permanently." Radine reached into her jacket, pulled out her phone. "I've been live streaming since we started. Any harm to us is public." The agent paused, then smiled thinly. "Smart. But not smart enough." Another agent lunged forward. Valencia shoved Radine aside just as the man tackled her to the dirt. The manuscript flew from her hands. Pages scattered across the graveyard. Radine screamed. Valencia twisted underneath the weight, reached for the spade, and drove it into the man's leg. He howled and fell back. Radine grabbed the fallen manuscript and bolted toward the trees. Valencia followed, ducking low as a second agent gave chase. They didn't scream, didn't shoot. Too quiet. Too late for cleanups. Too early for headlines. The girls reached the perimeter wall and vaulted over, landing hard on the frozen grass of the old mill grounds. Radine hissed in pain. Twisted ankle. Valencia grabbed her arm. "Come on." They disappeared into the mist. Behind them shouts faded. Only one thing mattered now. The manuscript was real, and it was in their hands. By sunrise they were in a borrowed safe house on the outskirts of Palmarin, a fishing village once used as a resistance hideout. Valencia spread the pages across the wooden floor. Radine counted. All there. Untouched. Unbelievable. It wasn't just a testimony. It was a blueprint. A ledger of names, accounts, coded procedures. How conversion therapy had been rebranded into government alignment camps. How media outlets were bribed to spin suicides as accidents. How queer women in high-ranking roles had been blackmailed into silence, or framed. But there was more. Valencia flipped to the last page. A signature burned into the corner. D. Verano. A current counselor. Still active. Still smiling in interviews. She looked up at Radine. "This could burn it all down." Radine nodded. "But how do we get them to hear it?" Valencia didn't blink. "We don't whisper
anymore.
We publish. A beat." Then Radine said, "We leak it to the iridescent." Valencia paused. The Iridescent was an underground queer-run digital zine with global reach. Trusted. Untouchable. Untamed. I have a contact. Radine said. She owes me a favor. Valencia nodded. It was time. Time to set the world on fire with the truth. Because this grave had refused to stay silent. And now, neither would they.
The screen came alive in flashes, pages, paragraphs, annotations, written in her own hand, but from another lifetime. Valencia stared. The words didn't just feel familiar, they ached, like a scar touched too soon. Like a memory clawing its way out of sleep, the story unfolded. Not fiction. Not anymore. Each chapter was a coded confession, a ledger of truths hidden in prose. Chapter 1. A woman named V. A place called the Glass District. A system of control where truth was currency, and forbidden love was treason. She read on. The characters weren't made up. They were masked. Each one a person Valencia had once trusted, feared, or loved. A doctor with silver gloves. A counselor with trembling hands. A lover who kissed her like it was goodbye, every single time. They all had aliases. But in the margins Valencia had written their real names. There was even one name underlined in red. Eva Leclerc. Valencia gasped. She hadn't made Ava up. Eva had existed. She could see her now, her eyes sharp, her voice always calm even when the world burned. In the manuscript Eva was a handler, a rebel in pearls, a whisper broker, killed in a freak fire, during a routine debriefing. Valencia dropped the flash drive. She remembered it now, the smoke, the alarms, Eva screaming her name through a wall of flame. The fire had never been an accident. It had been a silencing, a cleansing, a cover-up. She turned to Rain, eyes wide with horror. They erased her from my mind. Rain nodded, eyes brimming with a sorrow that had clearly waited years to speak. They erased you too, she said softly, but the story, your story, kept bleeding through. Valencia turned back to the screen. She scrolled, past the love story, past the heartbreak, into something colder, sharper. The final chapters weren't just personal, they were tactical. Coordinates, instructions, warnings buried beneath metaphors. There was a list. Not of names, but of code names. Each entry paired with a location, a skill set, and a single directive. Activate only if seduction fails. It wasn't just a love story. It was a blueprint, a failsafe, a contingency for when the world turned hostile again. One codename caught her eye. Hourglass. Next to it, Pier 314. The location from her journal. She stared at the page. She hadn't been decoding her novel. She had been remembering her own mission, her own life. The one they tried to delete. Valencia stepped back, knees trembling. I wrote all this before the fire. Rain reached into the console drawer and handed her an old ID. It was smudged, but the name still burned like a brand. Project Cipher, Valencia E. Devane, behavioral architect. Valencia blinked. That's not what I do. Rain smirked gently. It was. They led her to a wall she hadn't noticed. A mirror, no reflection, just silence. Rain touched it once, and it shimmered. Behind it, rows of equipment, not weapons, tools, blueprints, surveillance intercepts, evidence, and a box marked, sirens inside, documents stamped with the name of the council that rejected her. All the signatures, all the votes, all the lies. Each page a receipt for a betrayal. They said you were too unstable to testify. Rain said, but what they meant was too unerasable. Valencia opened the final folder. In it, a schedule. One last hearing. Tomorrow. At the center of it all, a manuscript review. Her manuscript, Lethal Seduction. Valencia looked up. You mean they read it? Rain nodded. They read it, and they panicked. Because Lethal Seduction wasn't just a story, it was a confession, a roadmap, a mirror they never meant to face. She scanned the list of those attending the hearing, all the names she had once feared, all the voices that voted her into silence. Valencia closed the folder. She took one deep breath, the kind you take before walking into fire. They wanted me to forget, she whispered. But I made forgetting impossible. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Still no reflection. Just outlines of who she had been, and who she was about to become. As Valencia stepped out of the echo room, the words of her manuscript, still glowing on her skin, she knew the next chapter wouldn't be written alone. It would be televised, and it would be war. The building looked the same. Polished marble, unbroken silence, security cameras hidden in polished steel. But today, everything was different. Valencia Edevane wasn't returning as a victim. She was returning as evidence. The hearing room smelled like old leather and freshly printed lies. 7 council members, 2 prosecutors, no audience, not yet. They'd called the hearing to review the subversive content of a manuscript anonymously submitted to their database. What they didn't know was that the author was already in the room. Rain sat beside her, calm, sharp, holding a sealed envelope marked Directive Echo 9. Valencia wore black, not in mourning, but in warning. The lead prosecutor adjusted his tie. The manuscript titled Lethal Seduction makes several unverifiable claims about this council's history and involvement in classified erasure programs. He began. It references real-world coordinates, names and code systems believed to be disbanded decades ago. He cleared his throat. Miss Edevane, do you deny writing it? Valencia didn't flinch. I wrote it, she said, twice, once with ink, once with memory. Gasps flickered through the room. The court stenographer paused, then resumed typing, slower. The prosecutor leaned forward. You understand these are treasonous implications. Valencia leaned back. You understand I'm not here to ask for your approval. The judge, older than both of them, tapped her gavel. Is there evidence beyond the manuscript? Rain stood, opened the envelope, pulled out a photograph, passed it forward. It was a scorched ID. Valencia's name, the project cipher stamp still faintly visible. The judge raised an eyebrow. Where was this recovered? Rain's answer was soft, but lethal. From a locked vault, below a decommissioned memory clinic, funded by this council. The room shifted. Something cracked behind the prosecutor's eyes. A flicker of panic. He tried to pivot. Tangential material. It doesn't prove systemic abuse or sanctioned identity erasure. Valencia opened her satchel, pulled out a USB. Then maybe this will. They plugged it in. The screen behind them flickered. Footage. From the echo room. The archive of erased women. Voices played. Screams. Testimonies. Deleted names reappearing one by one. Each timestamp matched an erased council directive. Each woman had been branded unstable, confused, disruptive. Each one had loved someone the council deemed unworthy. A woman with fire in her voice. A girl with dirt under her fingernails and poetry in her lungs. A teacher. A journalist. A daughter. And then, Eva. Her voice from the past. They can't burn what I've already made eternal. Silence followed. Heavy. Unbreathing. The judge leaned forward. Miss Edevane, how did you retrieve this? Valencia stood, and for the first time didn't look small. I didn't retrieve it, she said. I survived it. And then I wrote it down so no one could ever silence it again. The prosecutor scoffed. This is highly circumstantial. He looked to the judge. She's building a mythology, not a case. Rain placed one final document on the table. The original project proposal, council letterhead, authorization to conduct identity resets on high-risk female operatives, demonstrating non-conforming emotional patterns. There it was, in writing, on paper, with stamps, with signatures. Valencia circled the authorizing name, Counselor Brannick, the same one who'd cast the deciding vote against her reinstatement years ago. The judge exhaled. You realize the implications of what you've exposed. Valencia nodded. So do they. She turned slowly. Behind the tinted glass, a press team stood frozen. Recording. Live stream blinking red. The feed had been active the entire hearing. And now the world was watching. Somewhere outside this chamber, people were seeing Eva's face for the first time, hearing stories long buried under policy and protocol, the kind of stories that couldn't be unheard once revealed. One by one, council members looked not at Valencia, but at their reflections in the screen, and for the first time they blinked first. The judge tapped the gavel again. This proceeding is no longer private. I recommend all materials be turned over to the independent tribunal immediately. The prosecutor began to object, but stopped, because Rain slid a second USB across the table. A backup, she said, just in case this one gets misplaced. Valencia sat down, back straight, unshaken. I told you, she said. I didn't come here for permission. I came here for impact. An impact was already unfolding, across 100,000 screens, in headlines writing themselves, in whisper networks reigniting, in the eyes of survivors finally seeing themselves in the story. Lethal Seduction wasn't a manuscript anymore. It was a movement. The footage from the hearing hit the internet like a lightning strike. No marketing, no campaign, no warning, just 28 minutes of fire and revelation. By morning it had over 12 million views. By noon it doubled. By nightfall over 30 million views. But the comments were more volatile than the numbers. Who does she think she is? She's making it up. She's a hero. She's our voice. She's lying for attention. She's telling the truth no one else dares. Lines were drawn. Sides formed overnight. But the most dangerous reactions weren't public. They came from private inboxes, encrypted messages, dead drop forums, messages that simply read, "She found it. Burn the record. Activate contingency." Valencia didn't care about the chatter. Not anymore. What mattered now was the leak. Someone somewhere had uploaded the entire manuscript of Lethal Seduction. Not just the redacted excerpts, not the courtroom summary, but the full thing, all of it. Pages Eva had written in candlelight, chapters she bled into, truths that had lived in the shadows for generations. Suddenly people were quoting it like scripture. Page 76 became a viral tattoo. Page 109 was chanted in protest, marches outside courthouses. Page 213, a vow spoken at underground rallies. Erase me once, I resurrect twice. The world was listening, but the council was watching, and watching was always followed by action. Valencia woke up to death threats, cease and desist letters, fake stories about her mental health. She was unstable, unfit, vindictive. Somehow all her university grants vanished overnight. One morning, Rain's car didn't start. When a mechanic checked it, his face went pale. The brake line had been cut. Clean, deliberate. Rain didn't say a word, but her silence screamed louder than panic. Valencia knew what it meant. They were escalating. She moved out of the safe house that night, not to run, but to remember. She returned to Eva's old apartment, the one sealed after the fire. It took 3 hours to break through the barricades. Inside, the air smelled like smoke and lavender. Ash, grief, memory. She ran her fingers along the peeling wallpaper. The floor still had scorch marks, but something under the boards gave a hollow sound. She pulled at it, and there it was, a rusted tin box, inside a cassette tape. Old, labeled in Eva's handwriting. Final Seduction. Valencia stared at it for a long time. Then she crossed the street to a pawn shop, bought an old tape player for $12 and a promise. Back in the room, she pressed play. The tape crackled. Then Eva's voice, low and trembling, filled the silence. If you're hearing this, it means they didn't stop you. And it means I didn't run fast enough. But listen carefully. The book they found, that wasn't the end. That was the decoy. Valencia's eyes widened. The voice continued. The real ending isn't on paper. It's inside them. There's a group, deep inside the council. They call themselves the Filament. They erased me. But not before I buried what they feared most. Their children. Born from women like us. Like me. Like you. They took the babies.
changed names, falsified deaths, but records exist. Blood doesn't lie. I found proof, and I hid it in someone who doesn't know what she's carrying. Valencia paused the tape. Her heart was thundering. She rewound it and played it again. Every sentence struck like thunder. You have to finish what I couldn't. Don't just publish the truth. Unleash it. The tape ended in static. Valencia sat in silence. Then a knock at the door. She turned. Rain stood there, face pale, eyes stormy. She held a black envelope, unmarked, just delivered. Inside was a single photograph, time-stamped, grainy. It showed a girl, 12 maybe 13. She had Eva's eyes, the tilt of her chin, the fire in her stare. Beneath the photo, a caption in bold ink. Still alive, for now. Valencia's throat tightened. Her hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a cover-up anymore. It was legacy theft, bloodline sabotage, a system designed to erase not only who you were, but who you might have loved, who you might have built, who you might have become. Valencia looked up. Her voice was cold steel. No more silence. No more secret. Rain met her gaze, and no more mercy. Valencia walked to the window. The protests outside were growing. She opened the cassette player again, slipped the tape back, rewound it to the beginning, then turned to Rain. We're going to find that girl, and when we do, she held up Lethal Seduction. We give her the pen. She didn't have a name in the system, just a number, 042913F. She'd been transferred 17 times before the age of 6, always between. Rehabilitative youth center. The kind with security gates, no cameras in hallways, and medication logs that mysteriously did. She didn't know where she was born, didn't remember her mother, but she remembered the dreams, a voice in the dark, telling her to run faster, to hide better, to listen when no one else believed her, and to never tell them what she could do, because this girl, codenamed Faye, by her latest intake file, could memorize strings of binary, like poetry, could rewrite lock systems with paper clips, could dismantle a surveillance camera blindfolded and rebuild it to face the wall. She wasn't taught these things. She remembered them, somewhere deep in her body, in her blood. She was 13, in a remote facility, outside Reykjavik, cold, gray, called the Alabaster Program. There were only 6 other kids in her unit, but only she had been moved in under ifward tossers. She didn't ask questions. She didn't speak unless say spoken to, until the day she hacked the lunchroom keypad, using just a fork and a song lyric. That's when the whisper started from behind locked offices. She might be one of them. Blood flagged, echo born. They were wrong. She wasn't one of them. She was the only one. She had no idea that Valencia was searching for her. No clue that her photograph had gone viral on underground networks. No knowledge that she had once been listed. Briefly, quietly, as the daughter of a woman erased from every government system on record. Eva, her mother. She didn't know that name, but she felt it. Somehow in her spine. It came to her in dreams. Came with a sense. Lavender and smoke. The guards noticed when she stopped eating, when she stopped talking, when she sat on her bed and stared at the wall for hours, whispering something to herself. Erase me once, read twice. One morning, a new staff member arrived. A tall woman in a white coat, dark gloves, a clipboard filled with falsified charts. No one questioned her, because the badge was authentic, even if the name on it, Dr. Ashira Kelm, didn't exist anywhere outside the ink of a forged ID. She walked calmly into the girl's room, closed the door, sat down slowly, and said, "I think you know how to define the rest of them." The girl looked up, no fear, only defiance. And then, for the first time in weeks, she spoke. "What do you want?" "I want to help you remember," Ashira said. "I don't need help." "Yes," the woman whispered, "but the truth inside you does." Outside. Outside. 30 clicks away. Ryan adjusted the signal booster on the portable uplink. Valencia sat in the back seat of a disguised front vehicle, watching the data flow in real time. Faye's location had finally been confirmed. Encrypted files hidden inside. The Echo name matched the photo and biometric data. The girl was Eva's, no doubt. And if Eva's final message was correct, she also carried the backup cipher to the real archive, not the council's forged version. Millions of erased lives, encoded, caged souls, hidden in a living human firewall. The plan was simple. Extract Faye, trigger the firewall, release the real record. But nothing ever went as planned, because 20 minutes after Ashira walked into the room, alarm started blowing. The building had been breached, but not by Valencia, by someone else, someone faster, more violent, and not there to rescue. They were there to eliminate. Faye grabbed Ashira's hand. No time to explain, she said. There's a chute in the med bay. Leads to the boiler room. I've mapped it. Ashira's eyes widened. How do you know that? I remember things I never lived. The girl said, I think I'm not just someone's daughter. I think I'm a backup drive. She pulled out a wire sheet hidden in her boot. Let's go. Outside. Ryan shouted into her comm. Valencia's change of plans. We've got hostiles breaching the east wings. Valencia didn't hesitate. Get me in. You'll be seen. Let them see me. She strapped on a vest beneath her coat, tucked the original Lethal Seduction manuscript into a burn-proof case, and whispered, Eva, if you're still in this, guide us now. In the boiler room below. Faye popped the grate with precision. Heat poured through the duct. Behind her, Ashira pulled her through. Faye nodded, but her voice shook. They're not going to let me live. They didn't let my mom live. Then let's make them regret trying. Above them, the hallway lights flickered. A shadow crossed a surveillance feed, and for the first time since its creation, the Alabaster program experienced a breach it couldn't contain. The firewall was moving, and this time, it had legs, it had memory, it had purpose, and it was heading straight for the truth. The girl's name was Miss, or at least, that was what the record said. She lived in a state-run orphan center in Thessaloniki, a facility for the emotionally disturbed. But when Valencia saw the photograph, she didn't see a disorder. She saw defiance. She saw not to Athens, not to Mykonos. Too obvious. They landed instead in Sofia, Bulgaria. Rented a beat-up van from a man who didn't ask for ID. Then drove 6 hours across the border. Silently. Valencia didn't sleep. Didn't blink. She played the cassette over and over. Eva's voice became her heart. The girl was somewhere out there, alone, targeted. And Valencia couldn't afford to be too late. The facility was tucked in a valley, fenced, guarded by private security in unmarked uniforms. The kind of place no one was meant to ask about. But menace, confirmed by a smuggled intake roster. And one more thing, her school counselor, a whistleblower named Irina, had secretly sent Valencia an encrypted voice note. She doesn't act like the others. Irina had said she hears things, dreams things, and once during a routine evaluation, she looked straight at the mirror and you're not the first to try and erase me. That's when Irina knew this child wasn't just surviving. She remembered Valencia and Ruth. Those agents surviving. She remembered Valencia and Ruth. The thermal cloaks, noise-canceling spray on their boots. Eva had trained them both. They breached the perimeter through a drainage shaft. Cold water up to their knees. Heartbeats pounding louder than the alarms that hadn't yet gone off. Inside the facility, Fluorescent lights buzzed. Children slept in sterile rooms with barred windows. Marin's room was on the third floor. East wing, hallway, room 319. Valencia reached the door first. No sound inside, just a faint blow open flame here. She knocked twice. Soft. The door creaked open, and there she was, wide-eyed, holding a flashlight like Marin didn't scream, didn't flinch. She looked at Valencia like she already knew. I had a dream about you, she whispered. Last week. Valencia knows. And you know. The girl nodded. No one, everyone. Valencia's breath caught. Marin nodded her head. You sound like her, like the woman in my dreams. Valencia opened her mouth. Fast play. That's her, she said softly. That's my mother, isn't it? Valencia nodded. Yes. Behind them, rain was already disabling hallway cams. Time was short. Extraction had to be silent, clean. But Marin refused to leave with us. But Marin pulled out a torn notebook. Pulled out a torn notebook. Sketches, symbols, notes in a language she hadn't been taught. Valencia flipped through it. Her hand trembled. They weren't just draw stories. Brian whispered. She's not just carrying Eva's blood. She's carrying the next chapter. They escaped through the utility shaft. No alarms, no confrontation. But the moment they reached the van, a drone hovered above. Valencia pulled Marin close, shielded her. Reem drew her sidearms. Their drone spiraled and died in the grass. They drove all night. No phones, no lights. By dawn they reached a safe house in Montenegro, off-grid, hidden in the hills, guarded by retired artist Lloyd Hospice loyal to Eva's cause. Valencia sat, guarded by Louis' cause. Valencia sat with Marin on the porch, the sun breaking over the horizon, and asked her one question: what do you want to do with what you know? Marin didn't hesitate. I want to finish the story, not just hers. Mine stepped out, handed her a pen. Blank. Heavy, engraved with one word. Unbroken. And as Marin wrote her first sentence, Valencia knew. Lethal Seduction was never just a manuscript. It was a seed. And now it had bloomed into someone the council could never control. Someone who wasn't just a daughter of Eva Vale, but the heir to everything they had tried to destroy. The girl who carried fire. And now she was learning how to wield it. The council never operated in daylight. They moved like old shadows through systems, institutions, and broken trust. But when the footage of Valencia, Reem, and Marin leaked to the encrypted archives, everything changed. Not on the surface. On the surface the world kept scrolling, buying, sleeping. But in deep webs and hidden forums, the story caught fire. Daughter of the self resurfaces. Eva Vale's legacy reborn. The Lethal Seduction lives. The Lethal Seduction lives. Within 48 hours, 3 council members disappeared. 1 defected and turned whistleblower. She released sealed court files, video transcripts, photographs of what had really happened to Eva Vale. The world gasped. But for those who already knew, it was confirmation, not revelation. The council struck back with lawsuits, cyber whispers that the entire thing was a hoax. But one file destroyed the denials. The original hidden tribunal records from 16 years ago, where Eva Vale was not judged, but sentenced. They had scrubbed her from archives, erased her from they had scrubbed her from archives, fabricated her mental breakdown loops, and in those years, her voice trembled but never broke. I loved her, she said. She made me dangerous, because I stopped being afraid. If that terrifies you, then perhaps you should feel more women like myself. The world didn't just watch, it wept. It wept. Me woke. Marin read the entire post. Then turned to Valencia. Then what am I? Valencia answered with a calm certainty. You're the virgin. From that day the racial trials became the rebirth of the movement. No longer under Gross' name. It was now called the Lethal Seduction Protocol. Not a book, a network. A network's largest of protocols. Not a book. A coalition of smarks. Leather's largest on truth bearers. Marin gave her first public appearance in Lisbon, not as a victim, but as an inheritor. She didn't ask for sympathy. She issued a challenge to every institution that thinks equivalence asserted as like asserted. Thank you. Because in threatening me, you forged me. In rejecting me, you revealed your weakness. The crowd stood in stunned silence, then erupted into thunder. Within weeks Valencia and Marin were targets again, not just of institutions, but of a new faction, a splinter group, calling themselves the pure remnants of the old order, sealed by seals, sealed by civil order, fueled by fear, prepared to burn what they couldn't control. Their first move. Blow up the Montenegro safe house. They failed. Thanks to Marin, she had predicted the breach through cipher-patterns hidden in old council texts. She wasn't just Eva's daughter or patterns hidden in old council texts. She wasn't just Eva's daughter. She was their worst fear of all three. The final showdown happened in a courtroom in The Hague. Valencia was summoned as the chief witness, Remus as the enforcer, and Marin as living evidence. But it wasn't a criminal trial. It wasn't a criminal trial. It was a reconstruction tribunal. A global reckoning of the injustices committed against queer operatives and whistleblowers of state security. Valencia stood before the tribunal, not as a victim, but as the flame keeper. He placed the original Lethal Seduction smirks unredacted, full of names, dates, places, and then she placed a second book beside it. Marin's, titled Subsidy. Inheritance. The tribunal opened the hearing. Marin walked to the podium, wearing her mother's jacket, her pen clipped to the collar. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't shout. She simply said, I forgive none of you, but I will not be what you tried to turn me into. I am not your shame. I am your mirror. And in that mirror, the blood soul everything. The tribunal ruled to dismantle the racial progress. The tribunal ruled to dismantle before the erasure protocols. Unseal all files, pay reparations to survivors. But that wasn't the victory. The victory came outside, where hundreds of ghosts, abandoned, silenced, mislabeled, stood with pens of theirs. Marin stepped out from the podium, walked past the cameras, and stood with them. With all of them, Valencia met her, and smiled. You finished it. She was. You wrote the last line. Marin shook her head. No, this is the first line of something big. This is the first line of something big. And so the story that had begun with betrayal, and censorship of offense, and pain, ended not in vengeance, but in reclamation. They rejected her love, her needs, her right to exist. But when they finally read Lethal Seduction, they realized the truth. This wasn't about one woman. It was about a movement they couldn't stop, because it had already become the ink was permanent, the focus improved, and the revolution was now written in every voice they trust. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to know just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.